Okay, now the session is on recording, and we would be doing this natural approach. We'll continue to do this. We have already discussed a lot of things about it. So, what I would like you to do till your last fellows are entering the room is to tell me what is the theory of language as far as the natural approach is concerned. Quickly. Here comes your slide, and we would be looking at, the theories of language learning. Okay. Let me admit a few people. So is anyone telling us about the theory of language? Acha. Minal, did you read it somewhere or it's just a guess? Did you give this method a reading? ये तो Asifa, this is an observation on which this method is based. There are many things to a method, the observation or the premise on which a method is, made. The other is the approach that consists of two kinds of theories, the theory of language and the theory of learning, both of these. And then there are a lot of other things also, designs and objective. So what you're telling us, Asifa, is, it's the observation which became the basis of natural approach. So you're right, but I'm asking about the theory of language. You don't study, people. Please start studying. The midterm is gone. Whatever had to happen has already happened, but please start studying. Now that means I have to revise a lot of things. Okay. Now, before we go to this design, it's important to look at the approach, which would consist of theory of language and theory of learning. Now, basically, as Minal also interpreted what might be the aim of this natural approach, the aim and objective, as you would look at this, would be, of course, communication. Okay, and you know that the focus is more. The attention paid to vocabulary is more than the grammar, right? So it is believed that this the quantity of information lies in the lexicon. Okay, until and unless people do not know the meaning of the content words in a particular language, they would not be able to learn the language. One thing, forms would come afterwards. Okay, both the things need to be learned, but the importance of lexicon or the vocabulary outweighs that in any other part of the language. Okay, everything would be learned. Syntactic structures might be important, forms, grammar, but it is the vocabulary that should come first, because language is viewed as a vehicle for communicating meaning and messages. Right now, as far as the theory of language is concerned, there is a criticism on this approach that there is no particular theory of the language. Okay, as far as the approach of natural uh, uh, approach is concerned, that should have a theory of language. There's no theory of language as such. Okay, like we actually name the theory in rest of the methods, but in this method there is no particular name of the theory, whether it's a structuralism or it is functionalism. Minal is right to an extent, because the purpose, looking at the aim, and the aim is communicative. Okay, so it should be functional, but these two guys, the proponents of this method, Krushen and Terrell, never speak about that. They never explicitly say that functionalism is the theory of language. Okay, so basically it comes in one of the criticism. If you had given this um, approach a reading, you would have come to know that this is one of the criticisms about this approach, that there is no specific theory of language that leads this approach. Okay, Krushen and Terrell, they see communication as the primary function of language. Okay, language is communication for them. Language is speech for them, in a way, like it was in the direct or the audiolingual method. Communication should be the target of any language learning, and it focuses on teaching communication abilities. They refer natural approach as an example of communicative approach, but they do not talk about a particular theory of language. So the natural approach is similar to other communicative approaches that are being developed according to Krushen and Terrell. And these two people reject, though their theory of language, in a way, I'm not saying it's functional because they never said it explicitly. Okay, they base it upon the communicative approach, right? In a way, it can be similar to the other methods that whose bases are communicative approach or whose bases are functional language teaching. But these two people, Krushen and Terrell, they explicitly, outrightly reject the other methods, such as the audiolingual method or the direct method. Why? Because there, grammar becomes the central component of language. Okay, they try to reach speaking skills or communicative ability through teaching of grammar. Okay, how communicative ability is approached through grammar in audiolingual method? How speaking is approached through grammar audiolingual method? Yes, class. Asma, are you raising hand to answer the question? You can just put it in the chat section, or if you're interested, I can, open your mic also. Yes, Adina, where are you today? I'm not hearing from you and I'm not getting answers from you. Who else answers me? Minal is there. She answered. Sarish answers sometimes. Okay, Wali also speaks. Yes, Ayman, Adina. It's a very simple question. Okay, Adina has, connectivity issues. How speaking is approached through grammar in ALM. यार, building blocks याद हैं? What do building blocks refer to? Yes, Walia. हाँ, so which aspect? अगर if I say that in natural approach, vocabulary is the focus, what aspect of language is the focus in audiolingual method? Exactly. Adina is right. Okay. See, now these two people, okay, Zahra is also right. But look at Adina's answer, right? Now, I was basically trying to inquire why they have rejected, Carol, Krushen and Terrell have rejected the audiolingual method, despite the fact that the aim of their approach, natural approach, and audiolingual method, it's similar, is to attain fluency, is to develop communicative competence. Okay, but these two people rejected audiolingual method for the reason or on the pretext that the major problem with these methods was that they were built not around actual theories of language acquisition, and basically these audiolingual methods viewed grammar as the central component of language. This is the reason. Okay, they rejected earlier methods because the goal is similar, but these people think that grammar does not help in communication. Okay, or learning of grammar or practicing of grammar would not lead to building of communication skills. It's their focus is vocabulary. The focus of other methods were, you know, grammar. So the major problems with these methods was their focus on grammar, and secondly, they were not built on actual theories of language acquisition. They were based on theories of structures. Okay, for instance, we saw that structuralism was the theory of language in our audiolingual method and in SLT as well, right? So now these methods that became a part of language learning theories were actually theories of acquisition. All these hypotheses basically deals with um, the acquisition of language. Okay, as the child acquire the language, so there's a possibility that second language learners can learn the language and they can be as fluent as acquisition of language may be, right? Okay, so basically while we are talking about language, theory of language, there is no specific theory, but what we have come to know is that they follow communicative approach. They reject the rest of the methods, not because the aim is similar, but because they focuses on the structures, whereas this method focuses on acquisition theory that we are going to see, and we have discussed them as well. And then they focuses on vocabulary. If we talk about what aspect or what part of language they are focusing, then they are focusing on the vocabulary and not on the structures or the grammar. Okay, because they believe that the quantity of information in the vocabulary or in the lexicon far outweighs that in any other part of the language. Maybe those are structures, or maybe those are other elements of grammar. So this is important. Now language, we are still discussing the theory of language, and having said that it does not have a particular theory, but like Minal she drove one theory out of it, so we can also derive a theory out of it, but we cannot specifically name the theory, as these two proponents of this natural approach never named any. So we cannot, but we can only, for matter of discussion, we can say that this approach views language as a vehicle for communicating meaning and messages. Okay, so from this we come to know that the focus in language is vocabulary, according to this approach or in this approach. Okay, now acquisition can take place only when people understand messages in the target language, and this is the significance of the vocabulary. Until and unless people do not understand the meaning of communication, they will not be able to communicate. So then they have they talk about these theory of learning, and then they talk about Krushen's theory of learning, And in Krushen theory of learning, we have already done 5 of the hypotheses, right? So theory of learning consists of acquisition theories, and acquisition theories of Krushen consist of all these hypotheses. I hope, are the hypotheses clear? Please raise your hands. Are all the hypotheses clear to you? How many of you are here who the hypothesis, Krushen's hypothesis, we have been referring to it since the beginning of the lectures. Now, how many of you understand these hypotheses very, very clearly? Raise your hands. Okay. Two people only. Why is that? We are already done with the hypothesis. Okay, few more. The people who usually participate in the class, they understand the hypothesis also. Anyway, when we talk about approach, we talk about theory of language and theory of language learning. So theory of language we have already discussed, and we know through the criticism also, but we can also derive some kind of a theory of learning from what is emphasized in this particular approach. Okay. Other than that, in theory of learning, it's about the acquisition theories, and there are certain hypotheses also, acquisition learning hypothesis. Now this, for those people who did not get this, we are doing natural approach, and in natural approach we are doing theories of language learning, and in these theories of language learning we are referring to Krushen works in second language. Okay, Krushen's most significant work in second language consists of his hypothesis. I think those are 5 hypotheses, and combined together those form acquisition learning theories, right? In some of the books you will find them as theories, and in other books you will find them as hypotheses. Okay. Now, acquisition learning hypothesis distinguishes 2 ways of learning basically. People can learn languages, or people usually learn languages in 2 ways. Either they acquire the language from their environment as mostly the first language, okay, or they learn the second language, which is formally learned, usually in the classrooms. Okay. Otherwise, if a language is not a mother tongue, but you have acquired it from the environment because you live with those people who are a majority group, and you get to hear that language often in your surrounding, so that is also acquiring the language. Anything that you acquire without any conscious effort, any language that you acquire, comes in acquisition. Now Krushen and Terrell believes that, when there are 2 ways, how can we make learning equal to acquisition? Because they believe that any language that is acquired is always better than the language that is learned. Okay, the performance in the acquired language is always better than the performance in the learned language. No matter how well the language has been learned, but it can never be equal to a language that has been acquired and not learned, right? So person perhaps is more fluent in the acquired language. So learning is basically a process which is conscious, and you learn the rules of the language, and then um, try to apply those. Now it results in explicit knowledge about the forms of the language and the ability to verbalize this knowledge. Formal teaching is necessary, and formal learning is necessary for learning. So learning according to this theory cannot lead to acquisition. So what we need to do according to the natural approach is to make learning as close to acquisition as possible, because Krushen favors acquisition over learning. Okay, anything that is learned gets a monitor on it. Okay, what is a monitor in language learning? According to monitor hypothesis, what is this monitor? What is this monitor? Quickly. Yeah, I really need new um, voices, new names to be writing answers in the chat. It shouldn't be just Ayman, Adina, and Minal, and few more. Avalia, for instance. Please participate. How do I know that you are there or you just got online and left? Quickly. Linguistics, I don't know if we have got the good lot this time. Otherwise, linguistics is chosen by the good students usually. Literature is chosen by, okay, literature can be chosen by the good student, but mostly we get the better ones. Right. What's the difficulty in it? I've told you. Yeah, it's a learned system. It's an editor. It works as an editor. Yeah. Where are you guys? See, same names. What's the difficulty? I did not ask you a very difficult question. I did not ask you to explain the monitor hypothesis for me. Yeah, it's not just the grammatical mistakes, but any kind of mistakes. Let's put it this way. It's an editor, so it would, check all the mistakes. Nahi, Nida, this is not the answer. Okay, Sarish is right. This is, it's a learned system. That's good. Yeah, I ask you such simple question. I never ask you to explain things. I just need to have a clue that you're getting what I'm speaking from here. Anyway, okay, basically the conscious learning that we call learning, they can function only as a monitor or editor that checks and repairs the output. Okay, when you learn the language, you learn it through the rules, you develop and you build a monitor which is equal to the editor in your minds. Okay, what does it do? It checks, it corrects, it repairs your output. Whenever you're trying to say something, it checks you, so it slows you down basically. So, and it comes from the learned knowledge. This corrects you when you communicate, and this is a conscious process. Okay, so what makes monitor, what makes monitor a hindrance? Why monitor is a hindrance? Krushan and Terrell also say that monitor is a hindrance. Why monitor is a hindrance? Yeah, Raksa, I write it in the chat also. I just not ask you that you are unable to hear me, but I put my question in the chat. So, okay, what makes monitor hindrance in communication? Oops, I send it to Nida. Let me send it to everyone. This is my question. What makes monitor a hindrance in communication? Quickly, what makes monitor hindrance? It slows down, definitely. यही तो मैं पूछ रही हूँ, क्यों? Why does it slow down? अरे यार, मॉनिटर कहाँ से jargon यूज करेगा? मॉनिटर तो एडिटर है. हाँ Minal, how does it slow down? Minal has given you a hint. Okay, she has actually rephrased my question. Yes, in this way. It asks you, it checks you. So it affects your fluency basically. It hinders your speaking, right? I'll give these girls more marks who are participating and who are, alive here in the classrooms. How do I know how you just got online and went to the kitchen? Yes, that's true. Uh, Monitor Acts basically it's a learned system, and we know that the proponents of natural approach, discussion and Terrell, are never in support of learning. They like everything to be acquired or made acquisition possible even when learning is required. Okay, so this monitor, when it checks, it hinders the fluency. It hinders basically the communication because it stops you while you are speaking. It stops you to check whether you are using the right structures, you have used the right kind of vocabulary. So there are three things that limit the success of this monitor. One is time. You do not have time when you are conversing with someone. Okay, and monitor needs sufficient amount of time for the learner to choose and pick and choose and apply a rule on what he is about to say. Okay, so time is the factor that limits monitor. Okay, monitor also focuses on the form, right? So it checks your grammar again and again. So it stops you from speaking fluently or to get engaged in a communication. You keep on thinking whether I'm speaking correctly or I'm not speaking correctly. Okay, so that becomes a hindrance. Since monitor has the rules of the language that you have learned, right? So you should know the rules. The monitor tells you, and the monitor does well that you apply those rules, right? So it deals with the time is a factor. You need a lot of time. Then it checks your forms, and then it checks your knowledge that you have put in your head through learning. So you're adding to monitor's knowledge, and then monitor's knowledge interrupts your performance in the language. Okay, while you are speaking, does not let you speak. Okay. Okay. Now I also talked about the input hypothesis. What is I in input hypothesis? What is this I in input? What is this I in input hypothesis? It is okay. I want to correct this quickly so that we can move on. We're just doing the things that we have already done. Yes, Dina is right. The current level of student proficiency or the current level of students' knowledge. Uma Khalid is also right. Sarah is right. Current knowledge, current competence, current proficiency. Already existing proficiency, competence, knowledge of the language. Okay. Input hypothesis tells you that whatever is taught to the student or whatever material is taught in the classrooms to be taught through natural approach should be I+1. Okay. Yeah. Valia tells you she thought that I is done enough on the chat. So let's talk about I+1, and she's right. Okay. क्या इंटर लैंग्वेज क्या एमन यार ये बीच में आके ना you confuse students. क्या interlanguage? What's the role of interlanguage here? I isn't the interlanguage. I is the current level of language proficiency, language competence, language knowledge. And then according to input hypothesis, students should be taught a little higher, okay, as next stage while he has written, that would be +1, right? We have not talked, Eamon, guys, we have not talked about interlanguage in this. This is Eamon's own creation. Do not follow her. Anyway, so I think this is clear to most of you. Input hypothesis. I don't have to repeat it, okay? Affective filter, we have done enough in affective filter hypothesis in Suggestopedia, right? Now the hypothesis, this hypothesis is built on research on second language acquisition, which has identified 3 kinds of affective filters, okay? Or attitudinal variable. These affective filters are basically psychological barriers, right? Now these affective filters can be high, or these affective filters can be low, and it really depends on the teacher how he handles the filters, but Krushen supports lowering down this filter. Now what are the variables in these filters? What this filter, psychological filters, consist of? This is number 1 is motivation, okay? More motivation, more learning, okay? Second is self-confidence. Self-confidence, self-esteem, self-image. All of these are similar things and very important variables in second language learning. If you're looking for doing a research, probably you know whoever is selected through the process, as HEC has told us, whosoever is selected to do the research can take any of these variables and can work on language learning, okay? Because some of these variables are directly proportional and some are inversely proportional to language learning. For instance, more motivation, more language learning. More self-confidence, self-esteem, or better self-image, more learning. Anxiety, more anxiety, less language learning, okay? So these are some of the effective filters that you need to remember, right? Other than that, we have done the natural or natural sequence of what was that hypothesis. Monitor, input, and this natural order hypothesis. We have already done that there is a natural order through which the child acquires a language, and similar should be the natural order when the person is learning the same language. For instance, they have given the example of English. A child who is acquiring English language would acquire the language in a certain natural order, and similar is the case with language learning, or should be, right? That is why gradation is important. The gradation that we came to know about in SLT. What is gradation? This word comes from SLT, but this is also applicable here. Gradation. What is gradation? हाँ, SLT में क्या थी gradation? Vocabulary और grammar को gradation कर देते हैं, उसकी grading कर देते हैं. What was that? Quickly. I've not asked the meaning of this, but I have asked the meaning in context with language learning. Yes, Adina, your class is looking at you for help. आप आंसर कर दें और इनकी जान छूट जाए. Minal always leaves a clue for the rest to answer correctly. Minal, you have given us a clue. डिफरेंसेस इन ग्रामर कैसे, किसमें? एसएलटी की ग्रेडेशन याद है? आई थिंक आई टॉट यू एसएलटी, आई एम नॉट रियली श्योर। जो हालात हैं आपके उसमें तो नहीं लग रहा है टॉट यू। See, you have asked me to put this on my channel, right? And my channel is being watched worldwide, I suppose. So all of this goes on air. Yes, Adina, what do you think about gradation? The hint is natural order hypothesis, yaar. Yes, your close sequence. क्या sequence करते हैं इसमें? Natural order hypothesis is similar to gradation in SLT. What do you sequence? हाँ, structures with sequence. You in gradation, when we were doing it in SLT, basically the structures are arranged according to their difficulty level. The learners learn the simpler structure first and then they move to the complex or the difficult structures. This is gradation, right? Yes, simple to complex. And this similar is the natural order hypothesis. Grammar structures are required in a predictable order, okay? And a similar order should be followed by the learners who are trying to learn the language which is required. For instance, if someone acquires English language, he follows a certain predictable order of grammar, right? So anyone who is learning the same language will follow the similar order. If the person who is learning the language follows this grammatical order or the predictable order, he would learn it faster. He would learn it as someone acquiring the language. Okay, Krushan believes so. Okay, now this really needs research. What should be the natural order of grammar, or what should be the natural order or the predictable order in which a child acquires the language? Similar would be the designing of the syllabus. If the grammar is placed in a similar order, the things would become simpler for the learners. Okay, all of this we have done. Please, though, if the hypotheses are still not clear to you, please give these a reading. Okay, now tell me how many of you are better in these hypotheses. How many of you can got this hypothesis today as we have repeated them? Yeah, this is systematic order for language learning. Okay, systematic तो नहीं, predictable order is the right word. ठीक है, SLT में हम systematic उसको कह सकते हैं, from simpler to difficult. उसमें एक और तरह की gradation होती है when we are talking about this natural hypothesis, natural order hypothesis. We are talking about not about sequence but a predictable order. Okay, right. Now raise your hands. How many of you are clear in these hypotheses, so that we can move to the objectives? Yeah, hypothesis itne important and not right now, but in your psycholinguistics also, in your research too, you should be very clear in these hypotheses. They have long-term implications in your linguistic studies. Now raise your hand if the hypotheses are clear to you. बस वो मिनाल और अदीना को समझ आते रहते. Thank you. And for those who are still not clear in this hypothesis, for instance, Zulekha Munir, Umme Roman, and Tahira, Suhela, Serish, Nida, Mevish, Asma speaks sometimes, Aksa, AD. Who's this AD? Anyway, Habiba, all this, please, Huma answer sometimes. All those who are not clear with the hypothesis, please read them. And these are available. If if the language of the book is difficult for you, you can read this from, if this book approaches and methods in language teaching. If the language happens to be difficult for you, which should not be, you can Google this. It is lying in simpler words everywhere. Okay, you don't need to worry about that. Okay, right? So we'll quickly go through the objectives, and then we'll do the rest of it next week. Okay, but for your readings, please read these hypotheses. These are very important. साइकोलिंग्विस्टिक्स में इम्पोर्टेंट है, आपकी रिसर्च के लिए इम्पोर्टेंट है, आपके दिस LTM के लिए इम्पोर्टेंट है. And later on, generally speaking, if you have graduated with a linguistics degree, Russian आपको, should be on your fingertips, I think. Okay. Now let's go to the objectives. Now the natural approach is basically designed for the beginners, and the objective is to help them becomes intermediates. Okay, they start from the big. It is basically this natural approach because it has come from the acquisition, right? So it is basically for the beginners who are just starting to learn the language as the child starts to acquire the language. Okay, so it is okay, Valia, if you give it a reading, see if you're attending the lecture, good enough. If you're reading, that's even better. But if you are only reading, not attending the lecture, then there's a problem. If you are only attending the lecture and not reading, that is also a problem. So both the things, complement each other. But those who have attended the lecture and have seen the discussion in the chat also, if you just read it once from anywhere, I do not limit you to the material that I have sent you. If you find some easy material elsewhere, you can consult that. There's no problem with that. Okay, so coming to the objectives, basically it's for the beginners. Now what is the objective? The objective is to take the beginners to the intermediates. Okay, so it has the expectations that the students will be able to function adequately in the target situation, as this is the common function or common objective for all the methods which aim at improving the speaking skills, which aim at bringing the communicative competence. So this is quite the usual kind of objectives. Okay, but what is different is that the level. Okay, they should be improving at all times, and they should be able to use it in the situation. They should understand the speaker of the target language. They should be able to convey simpler ideas, and they can perform simpler functions like requesting. Specifically, this request function of requesting is mentioned. They can put questions also. They can ask for things, okay, which are the requirement of every day. They need not know every word in a particular semantic domain, nor it is necessary that the syntax and vocabulary be flawless, but their production needs to be understood. Whatever they are speaking, they should be clear in that. Okay, there can be errors. Now the expectations of Prussian and Tarot are not very high from this method. Okay, they think that there would be errors also. The students might not know all the words that might be required in that particular situation. They are not needed to be flawless in their vocabulary too, but they should be able to speak in simpler structures. They should be able to make requests. They should be able to ask questions. Okay, this is the requirement of daily communication. They are not required to have a lot of vocabulary, okay, or know a lot of structures. So they should just be able to make a meaningful communication. Meaningful communication, sometimes, see, I've been receiving many emails from your class also, and from master's third also. What happens in those email is I get the meaning. ठीक है, वो तो आप इंग्लिश के स्टूडेंट्स हैं. My expectations are really high that your English should be flawless. Okay, it should not be erroneous. errors should not be tolerated at this stage. But if I just give you the example of what is meaningful communication, जिसमें आपको मतलब समझ आ जाए. When a child speaks to you, he asks for something, usually we understand. His structures are not complete, his vocabulary is not clear, even pronunciation is not um, understandable, but we understand the meaning, so that communication is meaningful. So here also Krushen and the other guy, they believe that Krushen and Tarum believe that the communication should be meaningful, the meaning should be um, should be should be got should get across. That's the right word. The meaning should get across. So even if there are certain errors in the structure, or if the correct vocabulary is not in place, but if the person who is in communication, the listener, gets the meaning, it fulfills the objective of natural approach. Okay, they don't ask for much, right? So tomorrow we are going to look at what they would be able to do at the end of 100 to 150 hours of teaching through natural approach. Okay, and what they won't be able to do after teaching of English and after teaching of Spanish. Basically we would be attending a Spanish class. So what they would be able to do and what they would not be able to do, what are the expectation of Krushen and Terrell from this particular approach. Okay, you may read it from this Rogers book, Approaches and Methods in Language Teaching, and we'll continue and try to finish this method in the next class. Here I put your recording to stop. Okay. Please start reading, right? I want you to read and want you to come read in the class.